David King is alongside of me. Your first thoughts after witnessing a pretty good game of footy on a Thursday night, Kingy?
Chad Warner, what a player. Wow. Wow.
What is going on?
That was unbelievable, that performance. And in the third quarter, he ripped the heart out of that game. He was unbelievable. John Longmire put him forward of the ball, and didn't he perform? That third term, just ridiculous. What do you have? He had 10 disposals. He kicked a couple of goals. And 5 of his 10 disposals become scores. They have now got 2 players that could challenge for Player of the Year. Heaney's probably first 6 weeks were amazing, and maybe he's just come off a fraction, but from that standard you have to. And Warner has picked up where he left off. What a pairing they are.
15 and 3 goals, 7 score involvements in the last half for Chad Warner. And they definitely weren't at their best. And John Lamar spoke about this after the game, sort of beaten up around the midfield, and the Western Bulldogs were very good in that space, particularly early. So to be able to come away with a result like that and go into the bye in this position, I didn't see this performance coming at the start of the year in terms of them being that dominant. But I thought it was a good game of footy. I thought there was a bit of a finals-like feel about it with how hard it was to move the footy at times, how many numbers were condensed into one area of the ground, how both teams struggled to move the football at times. And the Western Bulldogs just made some critical errors, Kingy, and Sydney were really good off turnover last night.
Yeah, I thought the game, I felt for Luke Beveridge, and let's just put this on the table early, because the injuries to Norton, they lost Scott very early in the game. I think 2 minutes in, Scott was done, so they were into their substitute very early. And then they lost Norton with that tackle, and then Ed Richards just after, who was best on ground at that stage. He was gone a minute into the third. So to come back and be within a couple of goals and within striking range late was a fantastic effort. And sometimes you just have that night where things conspire against you. I feel that was that night for Luke Beveridge. I liked the way they played. And I love the use of Marcus Bontempelli forward of the ball in the last quarter. They looked dangerous. It looked different with the Dogs. It was different types of players that were really making them bubble at the end. I thought Treloar was terrific all night. I thought Gallagher showed some signs in the last quarter that he can be a player. I thought Garcia did some really clever things in the last quarter and was creative.
And West going inside, I thought. And it's not big numbers for West, but I thought there's definitely something you can explore with him inside at centre bounce.
And even Riley Sanders, he's still learning the craft, and he's going to be one of those players I think that's going to get some tough love early, and Bevo's treating him. He's making him earn every opportunity, and rightly so. There's no problems with that at all. They just ran out of numbers. It's as simple as that. They ran out of tickets and they ran out of numbers. But if you look at the way this game was played, and we focused on it a lot on Fox last night, the way the Dogs want to win a clearance is inside to out. They want to win it right in at the coalface, in that inner circle. The Swans are different. They want to be back shoulder and winning it on the outside. So they're both just as productive from clearance, but they do it in a different way. And they were just too tough for Sydney. For the first quarter of footy, they should have had a 3 or 4 goal lead at quarter time. I thought they monstered them early, and they didn't monster them as much in the second quarter, but at half time, they didn't have the lead that they probably deserved, and they left the Swans in the game, and they were just too good in that third term when John Longmire challenged them.
And because they have had a relatively easier draw to this point, the Western Bulldogs, those games that they have dropped to the likes of Hawthorn, they got close to Geelong, are really going to hurt. So it's Collingwood, Brisbane and Fremantle in the next 3 before they have a bye. I feel like they're a team that needs the bye now. Sydney have got theirs now. That's just the way that it falls. So the next 3 weeks could completely destroy and derail their season, or if they're going to play footy like they have the last couple of weeks, they're going to be in it and there's still going to be a final shot. But this is make or break almost next week for the Western Bulldogs with where they sit now. Now, it will be without Norton. It will be without Richards. And we'll wait and see what happens with Libba, but probably still without Libba, but you're right. I mean, if they can galvanise themselves to play that footy like they have the last couple of weeks, and they're going to be in it, and with the amount of talent in their list, they're going to be a tough proposition. But just fell short last night, and look, some of those 50 minutes. Can I just speak about that? Like, what are we doing? A 50-metre penalty is such a big and harsh penalty that it should be reserved for the most undisciplined acts on the field, or for deliberate break of the rules. Okay, running through. I get all that. There is rules, and you've got to adhere to that. But the one that we saw late last night with McLean, that is not a 50-metre penalty. Don't pay and don't insert yourself into the game, umpires, to pay a 50-metre penalty for that. The free kick against Warner, where then he points at the scoreboard. I get the players are instructed, if you point at the scoreboard, that is a 50-metre penalty. But it shouldn't be. Like, he's having a laugh. It's a shocking free kick that he's given away, and he's gone, have a look at that. It wasn't demonstrative at all. How we can allow players to throw their arms up and really have a crack at the umpire and not receive a 50-metre penalty, and Warner just sort of points to the screen and that's 50, is a joke. So
and the other one as well, where the Dogs player, there was confusion as to whether the mark was taken by two Swans players who marked the ball at the same time, and the Dogs player just nabbed one of them, just grabbed him, thought it might be called play on, and they paid 50.
Common sense, surely.
Unbelievable.
Just umpire with some... No one is sitting here going this morning, if you didn't pay any of those 3 50-metre penalties, you've made the wrong call. Everyone's saying, okay, we understand it. That's common sense umpiring. It's a tough game to play for the players. Like, ridiculous. And that should not be having an influence on the result of the game where it did last night. So that's just one real frustration for me. Just the umpires just need to pull their heads in a little bit.
If we're going to continue with this round zero idea, right, the opening round, we cannot have the buys set up the way it is. You cannot have the Swans having a buy at round 5 and round 12 and some teams waiting till round 15 for their first buy. I mean, we've got so many problems with equalisation across the comp as it is. This is just a nonsense. You can't have... The Swans are in pure health, almost to the point of... when you look at the cross the competition, it's an advantage for them. And their program's in great order and they've done a great job. But there has to be some reasoning or logic with a round 5 bye and a round 12 bye that puts them in a better space than a team that has to wait 15 weeks.
Yeah, and
if we're going to have round zero, I think they need to either have one game for one weekend and 8 games the next weekend at about round 5, and don't create this distortion and this advantage for some teams over others.
It's a big advantage. And Melbourne's probably the same. So they had their bye in round 6. They've got another one in round 14. Like how Collingwood bye in round 5, one in round 15. Chris Scott was huge on this, I don't know, 7 weeks ago.
He's
speaking.
right.
And he's absolutely right. What a time to get a bye for Sydney with the position that they're in. And the Western Bulldogs have got to go right and through until round 15 before they even get their bye. 1300 736 736. Anything else strike you last night? Is there a worry with Sydney's key forwards? Would be my only... The amount of times Amadi gets his hands to the footy but drops it. Logan McDonald is probably just going at the moment. McLean, I thought he was okay last night. I thought he was pretty good actually, but unreliable with the set shot in front of goal. That would be my only worry. And then they did look a little bit vulnerable with the amount of marks inside forward 50 that the Western Bulldogs took last night. Like Aaron Francis is there. He won't be there when everyone is in full health and was subbed out. But there's still a couple of concerns that they'd be a little bit cautious of.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because we're big on the numbers. So you go back to the numbers to see where their forward 50 ranks. Their forward 50 is second best in the comp at turning into a score over the last 6 weeks, and their defensive 50 is the best in the comp at denying scores, and that's without McCartan. So it's hard to be critical of them. Look, a lot of the cracks are wallpapered over by how good these mids are going. The key three in Goulden, Warner, and Heaney. So I guess that's the discussion. How far can these three take you in this form? If they lose form, where does it leave them? And I guess then you're talking about when does Mills come back and what's the role of Parker in all of this. So it's the unknown. We're talking about the unknown, but what an asset these three are, Cornsey. Can you just see this running through?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Running the year, running the table.
Well, you can now. I mean, finish top 2. Don't leave the SCG until grand final day. That's the opportunity that they have right now. So that's where it sits. So when you are an interstate side and you're this good, and it's got to be top 2. The top 4's not clearly not as good. And then the prospect of not leaving until grand final day is real. Hey, after they beat Sydney in opening round, I sort of came off the long run and said, how could Melbourne have allowed Brodie Grundy to walk to a fellow contender for nothing and leave them a little bit vulnerable with Max Gawn? And we disagreed a little bit. A few more weeks on, do you start to think not only has it hurt Melbourne with the lack of backup for Gawn and the amount of work that he's been forced to do and everyone coming and targeting him, but it's actually turned their competitor into a real threat.
But don't you have a different opinion with Darcy and Jackson?
But No, well, not really, because you're not paying $1 million. You're not paying Gawn and Grundy $1 million each, and you're not forced to pay them in the same side together. Grundy could have easily just played VFL until Gawn needed a rest. You didn't have to play them together.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you've also gifted for nothing a fellow contender, a very good ruckman, for not much. So it's not only what it's hurt you, it's what you've given the opposition and a fellow contender.
So you prefer to keep 2 ruckmen then at that level, that status and that cost of ruckman on your list?
You've got to have 2.
And just play one of the 2s.
Yeah,
and have him earning $1 million a year.
You can filter it. You can filter Grundy in, and you can play him for 12 games a year. You can rest Max Gawn. You can sub Max Gawn.
They did all that. They did all that last year, though. It
worked okay.
But it got enormous feedback in the middle of last year. I remember people being critical of the whole thing. He doesn't work forward. What are you doing playing him forward? We've got to play him somewhere.
Play him in the VFL until Max Gawn needs a spell.
Gee whiz.
It's a big gift to give a fellow contender for not much.
Yep.
You've got Tommy Fullerton. What happens if Gawn goes down? You've got no backup there. And
I didn't think Grundy was that good last night.
No, but Sydney aren't the same team with Peter Adams in ruck as they are with Brodie Grundy.
No, this is very true. Very true. It's a very good point you raise. No, I think it's a great acquisition, and it's smart play.
But you don't think Melbourne would regret it?
No.
Okay.
I don't think Melbourne would regret it. How would Melbourne regret it?
Because they've turned a fellow contender into a very good midfielder by giving them a player who they had contracted for 4 years, left on their list for not much, didn't get any return for him, and the results that not only Sydney have got, but the concern over Gawn at his age, with the amount of miles in the legs, they can't even rest Gawn. Like he goes to Perth to take on Westcote, and they can't even rest him.
Yeah,
because they've got no one.
Well, let's hold that logic with Darcy and Jackson then.
Hold
that logic.
No, but we can't, because what they're doing.
Why can't we? You can't have logic, the same logic.
No, because you can. Because Fremantle could have got 2 first-round draft picks for Darcy at the time, and that would have been a very.
Who was given 2 first-round draft picks?
Someone would have given.
Who was giving 2 first?
Someone would have given.
No, that was a waffly media article.
100% would have given 2 first-round draft picks.
That was something on Big Footy or something. There's no way a club would have given 2 first-rounders for Darcy.
They would have
absolutely
given
no way.
Very good pick for Darcy, and you had Jackson. You could have got a lesser light in terms of a ruckman as a backup, say Lloyd Meek, and just kept him, and then had that combination versus trying to force one of the great ruckmen, Luke Jackson, into a forward, which he's not. So I don't share the same logic there.
Yeah, and I think you're making 2 different reasons for the same discussion. But in saying that, I don't think the Swans necessarily do it off hit-out advantage anyway. I really don't.
But compare them this year to last year with what they had in the ruck last year versus what they have now. Yeah. You do need a competitor in ruck, and he's definitely been a competitor for them. I think he's been pretty good. I don't think.
Where does Heaney play in the first final? Is he going to be forward? I think it's a taxing. He's never done this. I made this point with you a couple of weeks ago. He's in unbelievable form, and I love him as a player. I love watching him.
You think he's a bit out on his feet?
Well, I just think it's a big load for him. We've never seen him do this for 80% ground time as a midfielder for this period of time. The buy's come at a good time. I just hope he can gather and go again and maintain this level because I love the way the Swans are playing. We want every team to play like this. Beautiful ball movement, high scoring, often going. But I just have my doubts that he'll maintain this level of output and pure health.
I had options coming out of my ears this morning.
Did you?
We only allowed. I could have gone the Norton stupid 9-year contract that they signed him for, and all of a sudden you get a knee injury, and all of a sudden that looks still. I could have gone that, but that was low hanging fruit. I thought.
Very much so.
I could have gone to Mason Cox, who's touching the footy about 6 times a game and not kicking any goals and not influencing games at all. But I thought that was maybe just a touch low hanging fruit. I could have gone to Nat Fyfe because tonight I'm looking at speed and Collingwood's explosive midfield, and I think he's been somewhat just of a little bit of a liability. His numbers look okay, but he's getting caught with the footy. He's missing easy set shots when he's gone forward. And I think tonight could be an issue. Is he exposed against Collingwood's?
Oh, God.
But in the end,
You've clipped half the comp so far.
I've gone with the genius Sam Mitchell. I'm putting Sammy Mitchell in the gun.
this is an uncomfortable feeling for you.
Because he's a good friend of the show and he's listening right now. I think the mindset of his group is far better when Hardwick is forward. So I don't want to see the flipping and the flopping
Sully.
of Blake Hardwick. So get his magnet, Sam. It's now Friday at 7:46. Put it forward in permanent texter and leave it there. I don't want the flipping and flopping mid-game. You're in that Hawthorn midfield. Oh, gee, Hardwick's behind the ball. We're in defensive mode now. And automatically, that's what they think. Put him forward, leave him forward. Scrimshaw's back. Sicily's back. You don't need him back anymore. Leave him forward and let him kick another bag of goals and stick him there. So Sammy the Genius is in the gun this morning. Kingy, sorry to take up a bit of time. Who's in the
Never
gun?
move a winner. It's an old coaching philosophy. Never move a winner. If a guy's kicked 5 goals in 3 quarters, you know what? He might just kick 3 in the last.
It was like the old school days when you're kicking with the wind and you put the best player to the end that the wind is going.
It was bizarre. The Genius had a bad one. I felt for you last week.
No, but he was a bit hamstrung last week.
Hang on. Let me finish. The game got to the last minute and a half. You would have been riding the greatest coach of all time, Ken Hinkley, home, hoping that he'd win. You've called the other coach the Genius, who set fire to a 40-point lead, and you hate 666, and it was the only thing going to save Ken. You're in the worst position a man could possibly be in for that last 60 seconds.
And I had
I nearly rang you.
I had 1,000 Port supporters bagging Ken Hinkley halfway through the game, all coming up in my Twitter. And
I nearly rang you. I nearly FaceTime you just to watch you go through it. In the gun for me, I've got a pair of coaches that go head to head this week in the gun. Chris Scott and Adam Kingsley. Ooh. And I love what they both do. I love how they both coach. But let's be honest, right now, neither of those two teams are playing anywhere near as aggressive as what they have over the last couple of years. And you get what you ask for in AFL footy. They need to restart spluttering units. And I'm wanting to see and waiting to see what levers they pull and who's prepared to go and win the game, go and stamp the game rather than save the game. Which players are going to come? I know there's been some availability issues with both teams, but they're just going. And one team will have lost 4 games in a row after Saturday afternoon. So for me, it's those two coaches to restart spluttering units. Who's it going to be?
7:35 on Saturday night, one of those coaches would have lost 4 in a row. And if it's Geelong, a couple of games at home in a row. And I'm not sure many premiership teams have lost 4 games in a row halfway through the year. And 3 weeks ago, I think both were 1 and 2 as premiership favourites. Kingy, what's on your agenda?
I'm just looking at the Collingwood lineup for tonight. And I think that this is probably the most they're going to lean on their senior core players for a long, long time. It is a young team. It is a very young team going home. I think they've got 6 guys with less than 10 games experience in the lineup. Harrison, Sullivan, Dean, Richards, and the 2 debutants in Parker and Ed Allen. Great to see them get their opportunity. So what that does do is shift the responsibility to the Dacosses and the side bottoms and the Pendleburys to have to do more, the Darcy Moores to carry load. Now they're more than capable of doing that. We know we've lauded them for being Hall of Fame level players. On the road, the more you look at it, the more you feel this is a game that Fremantle just have to stamp.
Yeah.
If they're the team we think they are, get a young team on the road like this, get the job done.
Have you been getting any feedback from the Fremantle fans who love you?
Well, no, they understand that I'm only talking about how they move the ball and how they played. I think there's been a bit of feedback for you from the coach.
Has there?
Yeah.
In what way?
Well, you're throwing these barbs out. You didn't think that'd come back, did you? I think he's wondering, he questioned the feedback from players who've never coached before or those in the media who've never coached before. He doesn't get the level of personal criticism that he gets from others other than Buckley and Matthews and these people.
Oh, he mentioned that he doesn't hear the criticism from Bucks and Lee Matthews. Well, why would you think that would be at me and not at the other many accredited media performers?
In the wording, it was sort of just the unspoken word. I'd like them to say who you're talking about.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Just remove the grey area.
Absolutely. Just say that. I'm not sure I've questioned the way is he inspiring to his team? And when he's gone, he didn't change bench. Has he been one to really lift his team? In terms of anything personal, I don't actually see that as personal, but I take the point on. If we give the feedback out, we've got to be able to accept it on the way back. But I think they're in a pretty good spot. The Dockers, I think they win tonight, and that will put them in a good position. Speaking of coaches, what does Ross do for the rest of the year, Kingy? Like, how does he?
What do you mean?
Well, how does he get
what are the options?
Well, get his team to kick more than 50 points, or try and do that?
You don't think he's trying that?
Well, he may be trying that, and certainly what he's saying publicly is suggesting that that's not the way that they're going into games to try and achieve that. But there's some sort of disconnect between what he's saying publicly and what his team is delivering, where they do mark the ball in the halfback flank and they're chasing a game and they'll kick it wide and they'll allow the opposition defence to get back. 5 marks inside forward 50 last week and the inability to score. So, I don't know. It's a long season to go if this continues for Ross and how he keeps the Saints fans engaged in what's been a disappointing year.
Yeah, well, it's been a disappointing year. I had high hopes for them this year. I thought they had a great pre-season. I thought they'd be better than last season. Hasn't turned out that way. They haven't had the winners forward of centre that they'd like. We've talked a lot about Max King, and they've been unhealthy in those small forward roles. So I think there's been no hiding of the issues down at St Kilda. They've been all warts have been exposed this year, and I think sometimes that's a good thing. I know we're going to disagree on this. If you're going to have a bad year, have a bad year. Expose all the problems, flush out all the issues, and then reset and go again. They just don't have the talent, Cornsey. It's become more evident, unfortunately. I didn't think this would be the case, but they don't have that. They don't have the guy. Forward of centre or in the midfield, they don't have the guy, which is I think clear and a real challenge for them now to get the guy. Is it Luke Davies-Uniacke? Is it that level of play you can get as a free agent, or do you just have to wait and be corrected by the draft?
Which teams don't have the guy? I'm just thinking on the spot here as you're talking. So, I mean, and some teams have more than one guy. So you go through Sydney, they've got 3, the guys. Port Adelaide, you probably got 3. Collingwood have the guy. Fremantle probably got a couple, and it's largely through the midfield. North would hope that I think Wardlaw is the guy, but you could make a case for Sheasel and some of the others. Dersma might be that. Carlton have got who doesn't? And if you don't have it, like Richmond, who's the guy at the it should be Bolton, but it's not. And
who's the guy at Geelong?
Yeah.
Who's the guy now at Geelong?
Well,
is it apart from Cameron's the obvious? Graham Myers, maybe?
Stewart. Who's the guy under 30
Stewart,
would be the question at Geelong. So that they would hope that it's going to be Jai Clark, pick 7, the next Joel Selwood, I heard prior to the draft, but that's probably not going to be the case. Who is it? Who's emerging at Hawthorn?
Merritt has stood up as the guy at the Bombers, hasn't he?
Yeah, at Adelaide, Rankin has emerged as the guy. West Coast, we know who the guy's going to be. But if your team doesn't have one and the Saints don't have one, then you're in a bit of trouble. 043390 out 1116. Does your team have the guy or someone who you can see being the guy in 2 years?
And it can be a short-term thing, Cornsey, too, can't it? Like you might lose that player for a 4 to 6 week period, just not having that same form or that influence, which was probably the West Coast for a little while. So when you see Harley Reid come in, you go, there's the guy. This is what the draft can do for you.
Yesterday in The Age, I wrote a column about just a hypothetical that if you were starting the competition from scratch and each club had access to any player that they wanted, you have to factor in age, how long they've got left in the game, I guess leadership, and setting up your club based around these players. Who would you pick? My top 10 were Nick Dacos, Harley Reid, Sam Darcy, JHF, Sam Taylor, Zach Butters, Errol, Jed Walter, Chad Warner, and Jamara Ugle-Hagan. Kingy, you've got your list of the 10 that you think would go 1 to 10.
Well, not in order, but these are my 10. So
Yep.
I've got experience in there because these guys are going to play for a long time. Marcus Bontempelli at 28. He's going to play at least 35. Christian Petrarca, the same.
Okay.
Nick Dacos.
Yep.
Charlie Curnow, 27. Only played. There's not a lot of K's on the clock there. Sam Taylor, Zach Butters, Chad Warner, Isaac Rankin, and you knew he'd be in there. Harley Reid and rounding out the 10 is Sam Walsh. And I flirted with the idea. of a ruckman. I think we should have been forced to put a ruckman in. And I flirted with the idea of out Walsh in Luke Jackson because I just think he could be the wild card ruckman of the
so I
comp.
had Jackson at 13. Your 10, Bont Petrarca, Dacos, Curnow, Taylor, Warner, Rankin,
Butters.
Reed, Walsh, and Butters. My sort of cutoff was about 25. I thought so. Taylor was, I think, the oldest of my 18. But it's an interesting exercise. It just goes to show that we're absolutely stacked. I had Rosie in there.
Old is new again, though, isn't it?
Well, they're playing for longer, no doubt about it. No.
How long? I mean, when's Petrarca and Bontempelli's finish line? I mean, they're going to play till 35. They haven't played deep forward yet.
Yeah. Heaney's probably the same. Probably can play
I reckon
forever.
Bontempelli, after seeing last night, I think he could play. He could play his last 40 games forward.
All right, that was for Cobram Estate Premium Australian Extra Virgin Olive Oil. It is Australia's most awarded extra virgin olive oil. It's grown, harvested, and first cold pressed in northern Victoria. Of the games ahead, Kingy, where does your interest lie? Obviously, there's fascination with all of them. Of course, I think the Gold Coast Carlton game is really interesting. You sort of said that Fremantle need to get it done at home against Collingwood, which I think we all agree with. Where do you sit on the Suns and their progression to come to Melbourne, to play at Marvel, where Damien Hardwick hates going, and to knock off a Carlton team that are struggling and not going that well and are facing a bit of an injury crisis at the moment? And the Suns, well, they showed last week they're made of the right stuff.
I think you're going to be surprised by the Suns. Ball in hand, they're a different model than what they've ever been, and this is coming together quickly. This is what we thought would happen. The coaching change we didn't see coming has had a massive effect. If you look at the last 6 weeks of footy, they're fourth ranked in terms of turning a possession into a score. Now, we've never said that about the Suns. So they've always posed defensive strengths and assets and made it really difficult to score against them. But you really haven't been threatened by their ball movement. Well, now they've been dimmotised. They've been hard-wicked. They've got their run and gun game going, their heavy corridor, and their midfielders now are getting forward of centre and hitting the scoreboard. So I'm interested to see that game. And the biggest game of the weekend is down at the Cattery.
Yep.
They've had a good record down there, the Giants. They've found a way to get the ball to ground in that forward line, and let their smalls like Brent Daniels and Toby Green go to work. I think last year was his 200th game last year, Toby, down there?
Yeah.
Or 250,
It wouldn't
200?
have been, I don't reckon he would have got a 250. Yeah.
200th, and they got the job done, and he said, no, we're going for a couple of beers after the game. It was him and Brent Daniels, I think, got him over the line, but they can do it. I think they've won their last 2 or 3 down there, so this will be a belter.
Yeah. Right.
What are you looking forward to?
Well, all of that. They're the three for me. So tonight's game, the Carlton Gold Coast game, and the one that you speak of, I think the rest probably take care of themselves. Disappointing that Saturday night Richmond are where they are at. Unfortunately, that's what happens from time to time. But they're the main three.